Welcome to the third video in my Sun Sign Astro Video Series. On Monday, May 20th at 5:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Sun will leave the sign of Taurus and go into the next sign of the zodiac cycle, which is Gemini. This is a great time to start marketing yourself in your local neighborhood and community. It's also a great time to communicate and start connecting with others and learning. Yes, Geminis love to learn. In this video, I will talk about the forecast for the month ahead. I will also explain what Gemini energy means. And, like always, I will show you what Gemini looks like in terms of personality by introducing you to some Hollywood elite that have strong Gemini in their charts. Let's get started. So let's begin with the forecast for the month ahead. The Sun will be in Gemini from May 20th to June 21st at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. From now till then, a couple of things are going to be happening. The first thing that's going to be happening is on May 25th at 12:25 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. There will be a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. Now, in my last video, I taught you a little bit about solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. Well, a lunar eclipse is when the Earth stands between the moon and the sun, cutting off the light of the sun from the moon. And a lunar eclipse is always a full moon, and it usually marks endings or culmination points. So on May 25th, we're going to be feeling kind of this culmination point somewhere in our lives. And it will be in the sign of Sagittarius. And so it really depends where Sagittarius is in your chart, what house it falls into, to kind of understand what's going to be happening there for you. The next thing that's going to be happening is on May 31st. Two things are going to be happening on May 31st. The first thing is Mercury is going to move into Cancer at 3:07 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, Mercury was just in Taurus. No, wait. It's going into Cancer, so it was just in Gemini. Sorry about that. It was just in Gemini, and Gemini is all about being quick, being adaptable, go with the flow, very chatty. But Cancer is way more, it's water sign, so it's way more internal, it's way more emotional, it feels everything, it's very intuitive, and it kind of wants to control certain situations emotionally. And so it being in Mercury, depending again where it is in our chart, we're going to be feeling extra sensitive to our communication. We may take things personally. And also we're going to be very intuitive, so we'll be able to walk in a room and kind of feel what's going on. We're going to feel the energy versus think about the energy, right? And so that's going to happen May 31st. That's when Mercury's going to go into Cancer, and it'll be there for about a month. And then also on May 31st at 6:39 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Mars will move into Gemini. Now, Mars was just in Taurus, and it'll move into Gemini. And so that's going to bring more talkative energy out in terms of where we want to put our determination and our raw drive into things. And so we're going to have this kind of like this new, like raw drive, inspirational feeling relating to wanting to learn new things and wanting to gain new knowledge and information. The next thing that's going to be happening in the month ahead is on June 2nd, Venus will move into Cancer. Again, it's going to really enhance that Mercury in Cancer. This is going to happen on June 2nd at 10:13 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so again, we're going to have this real feeling of emotions coming out. But with Venus there, what that kind of manifests as is Venus is all about beauty and values and passion and what we love and value and even romance. And so we're going to really see a need around the beginning of June to start really wanting to connect more deeper in our connections with people. And we may even start having this kind of like newfound love and passion for wanting to be at home and cook and be very homey, because that's one of Cancer's themes. And another thing, there's a lot happening. Another thing that's going to happen is on June 7th at 4:26 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the planet Neptune, which is in Pisces, is going to go retrograde. Now, why is this important? Pisces is actually ruled by Neptune. Neptune is a Pisces planet. And so it's already creating this more intensified experience being in its natural sign. And it's been there for a little bit of time now, but it's going to go retrograde. And Pisces and Neptune are both kind of the dreamy, rose-colored glasses, if you will, planet and sign of the zodiac. And it's really all about fantasy. So any way we can escape, and sometimes escaping is good because it means that we're creating. Maybe we're writing a song, maybe we're reading a story, maybe we're seeing this epic movie that we just love the story of, right? And we escape into that beautiful story. But then there's the negative of Neptune and Pisces, which is escaping away from reality to avoid it and escaping using drugs, alcohol, what have you, or just being lazy or eating food or watching TV. And so with Neptune going retrograde, we're going to see in the negative manifestation form, we're going to see a need to escape, a need to avoid reality. This is happening on June 7th, by the way. And it'll be retrograde for quite some time. But the positive is us feeling way more inspired because retrograde is an internal experience. So we might be feeling way more inspired and we might get a dose of inspiration to write a new song or create. And the last thing to look forward to this month ahead is on June 10th, we begin pre-Mercury retrograde. Folks, this is not good. Now, Mercury retrograde gets a really bad rap because Mercury retrograde, it's one of the planets that is closest to the Earth. So, for example, Neptune's going retrograde, but it's a little bit farther away and it's a slower moving planet, so we don't feel it as intensely. Whereas Mercury's changing signs, kind of follows the sun. It changes signs almost every month, and it's closer to the Earth, and so we feel it way more when it goes retrograde than any other retrograding planet. That's why it's so well known, Mercury retrograde. And Mercury is actually a Gemini planet. So we're approaching Sun in Gemini right now. So it's a really kind of, it may even be more intense. It might be more intense because Gemini is all about communication and connecting and kind of the physical plane type of level of communication, transportation, technology. During a Mercury retrograde, people find that everything breaks down. Technology stalls, phones break. They say not to buy any electronics during this time. All of that stuff is very true. But the good of Mercury retrograde is it's a time to slow down, to go inward, and to really slow down. So meditation, yoga, therapy, art, right? And another great thing about Mercury retrograde is it also brings in past and old friends, almost like a reunion kind of feeling. So you may see some of that as well during that time. But anyway, so on June 10th is the pre-Mercury retrograde. What that means is it's not Mercury retrograde yet, but we usually start to feel it about 1 to 2 weeks before it starts. And I find that the pre-Mercury retrograde is sometimes the worst time because we're not ready for it. And then once we go retrograde, we start to adapt to that. So I usually find that it's the before, the pre, and the after, the post, that is the hardest times when it comes to Mercury retrograde. So that's the forecast for the month ahead. What is Gemini? Gemini is an air sign, mental, thinking, ideas. Gemini is also a masculine sign, so they direct their energy outward, and they're outgoing, but not as loud and aggressive as fire signs. Gemini is also a mutable sign. Mutable signs want to adapt to their environment, absorb different perspectives, learn what they can, and then impart that knowledge to others. Because of this, mutable signs are very flexible, adaptable, and go with the flow. Mutable signs constantly want to understand things. They want to understand people, situations, why things are happening, why things work the way they work. But sometimes they can find themselves changing their belief and ideas one day to the next. So one day they're believing one thing, the next day they're believing something else. People are confused. What do you really believe, right? So whereas a Taurus is very loyal, fixed signs, not just Taurus, fixed signs are very loyal and all or nothing with their opinions. Mutable signs, very adaptable, go with the flow. It's always a different thing every day. Mutable signs also love to teach. And since Gemini is an air sign, they usually focus that desire of sharing knowledge in various forms of communication, such as writing, speaking, acting, reading, what have you. They adore words, adore them, the sounds of words, the use of words, but most importantly, the definition of words. So, just like Aries and Taurus, Gemini is in the survival stage of astrology. The first stage, there are 3 stages: survival, social, and spiritual. Survival signs, their focus is how do I relate to myself? How can I survive, right? And then the next stage is social. Those signs think, how do I relate to others? A relationship, social. And then the spiritual stage, those signs think to themselves, how do I relate to the world? Spiritual. Got it? So Gemini is the air sign of the survival stage. So there's one element for each stage. So Aries is the fire, Taurus is the earth, and Gemini is the air, and Cancer next month is the water. So one element for all survival, okay? So Gemini is the air sign of the survival stage. For them to convey their self-ideas, thoughts, and knowledge in an articulate, communicative manner is literally a matter of survival. If Geminis can't communicate their ideas, understand how the world works, assimilate into their environment to gain important knowledge and share that information with others, they feel like they could die. For that reason, facts and grammar are very important to a Gemini. Words are Gemini's most important tool for survival. If they don't present the correct words or have all the facts in order, they feel inadequate. Geminis like to be in the know. And so Geminis are the geeks of our society. They're the schmoozers also and the salesmen too. Geminis are the publicists, the writers, the speech teachers, and the English teachers of our world. So it's pretty clear now that we know that Geminis love knowledge, right? They love to learn. But Geminis don't really like to dive in too deep to one subject. Their style is more that they like to learn a little bit about a lot of things so they can come off wise and witty no matter who they're dealing with, who they're talking with. They want to come off like they are in the know with everyone. So, because of this, Geminis are really good at lying. Yes, they are the liars of the zodiac. Now, it's not that Geminis want to lie. It's not like their intention is, I'm going to lie today. No, no, no. It's more that they want to present themselves in the best light. They want to kind of be shiny and perfect, right, in every way that they can. And so they want people to buy what they're selling. So, in order to do this, sometimes they need to kind of fib or just present that surface kind of front instead of really diving into the honest, vulnerable, authentic truth of themselves. And so their quick, adaptable, and changeable nature really does help them do this because they can be with one crowd and be kind of bantering and chatting it up, and then go over to the next crowd, totally different type of crowd, do the same thing. And in that, banter, they may not be fully telling the truth, but you're totally buying what they're selling. Another thing they do when they're speaking to a crowd or communicating with people at a party, what have you, they love to use surface level humor to get people on their side because they never want to get too heavy or too deep. If they get too deep, then that perfect presentable front is no longer maintained. And then Geminis come off human, vulnerable, or unprofessional. And they might have to admit that they don't have all the knowledge that they pretended to have. This is very scary for a Gemini because of their survival mentality. And this is where the twins come into play. Yes, Gemini is the sign of the twins. So, Geminis have 2 sides to their personality. Now, it's important to note that all air signs have 2 sides to their personality. Air signs like to think about things before they take action. They like to see both sides, weigh things out. And so, because of that, all the air signs, Aquarius, Libra, and Gemini, have two sides. But because Gemini is in the survival stage and they're not really thinking about other people, their focus is on themselves and surviving. Their two sides are very, very extreme, and that's why they're known as the sign of the twins. So, what are these twins? Twin 1 is their logical mind, and twin 2 is their emotional heart. Unfortunately, they can only be one twin at a time. So their mind is the side that's their work and public front. And because they can be 100% logical, 100% mentally focused, they can completely take out the emotion to any situation and be 100% logical. So sometimes they might come off like they just don't care. That's really not the case. It's more that they're just trying to be 100% logical and they're being the mind, right? The other twin is their heart. And their heart is their social kind of personal, private side. And this is more of their real side, I would say, where they don't have to always have all the knowledge. They can be a little bit more vulnerable. But this side usually doesn't last very long. This is why Geminis are known as the quick change artists. Before you know it, they're someone else. They are very tricky, those Geminis. The negatives of Gemini. A lot of people complain that they're very rigid with facts. They can't open their minds to meaning. It has to be the textbook version of things. They can't break the rules, so to speak, and have to be snobby about grammar, facts, and knowledge. So you could be telling a fabulous story to a Gemini, but they aren't hearing you and they're not heart connected to your story because a couple of reasons. One, they're too busy correcting your grammar. Two, they're too busy kind of focusing on how they're presenting themselves to you or others in the room because they have to be, shiny and perfect. Or three, they're making sure your facts are correct, right? You know what I'm talking about. So this can be a disadvantage for a Gemini because they lose that intimacy that true connection can bring with another person because they're too busy with all the surface stuff that need to be okay, right? And their need to keep up this front or this facade can really create two-faced behavior, lies, fakeness, major indecision, and at worst, living a double life, lying to the self. The good is that they can sell anything. I could give a Gemini a box of toilet paper, and they'd probably be selling truckloads of that toilet paper within 24 hours. Yes, they're really good at selling things, and they may be the smartest and wisest of the zodiac. They're excellent teachers, great editors, and they're fabulous with foreign languages. Bring a Gemini on your next international vacation, and they will learn the language within minutes. I bet you anything. Any quick word games or spelling bees in your future plans? I don't have any spelling bees in my future plans, but you might. Well, bring a Gemini. They're going to win the spelling bee. And they're probably hosting your next game night anyway. So when the Aries is cracking jokes and watching the football game in one quarter of the party, the Taurus is cooking the steak and talking about gambling in the other. What's the Gemini doing? Well, they are probably having a fabulous conversation over wine, selling their latest product, and getting Trivia Pursuit ready to go. In order to understand each sign, you have to understand the opposite sign. The opposite sign of Gemini is Sagittarius, my sign. Both signs are mutable energy, adaptable, go with the flow, flexible. But where Gemini is air, Sagittarius is fire. And where Gemini is the survival stage of astrology, Sagittarius is the spiritual stage of astrology. So, where Gemini is coasting on the surface and alphabetizing their encyclopedias, Sagittarius is traveling, meditating on the mountaintop, and getting ready to write the latest song. For Gemini, it's about the mental, logical, self-ideas in order to survive. And for Sagittarius, it's about the soulful, impulsive, bigger picture wisdom in order to contemplate what life is. Geminis present themselves with poise and professionalism, keeping to the surface to sell their ideas to the local community, where Sagittarius comes up brash, even messy and clumsy at times, so they can passionately express the true meaning of the universe to break free of worldly limitations and to get to the core honest truth beyond the local community, to the world. The Gemini needs the Sagittarius, and the Sagittarius needs the Gemini. The Sagittarius needs that filter and professional banter that Gemini can really teach them. And Gemini needs Sagittarius to get them out of their heads and into their hearts so they can experience learning versus being stuck in a textbook and not heart connected. Now it's time for some Gemini examples in Hollywood and beyond. Are you ready for some Gemini celebrities? There are many categories for Gemini. The first category is writers and word masters. Geminis love words, and because they're a mutable sign and they're flexible and adaptable, they're very quick, witty, and know exactly what to say in the way they want to say it. So let's look at some of these examples. If you look at the writers, C.S. Lewis, J.K. Rowling, J.R.R. Tolkien, they have a lot of similarities. Look at C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, both Pluto and Neptune in Gemini. Now, C.S. had his moon in Gemini, and Tolkien had his midhaven. His midhaven is his public persona. Makes sense, he was famous for being a writer. Neptune is fantasy, and Pluto is tragedy. And if you really see their writings, it's a mix of fantasy and tragedy. It's very, very, very in alignment with those planets. Then you have Anne Frank. She was a Gemini, and her Mercury was in Gemini in retrograde. So she was born in a Mercury retrograde, which makes her more of an internal writer, aka writing in her diary. Then you got Shakespeare. He's got Venus in there with his Gemini, which really, really brings out the beauty of words, which is very much his writings. And look at Stephen King. He's got one planet in Gemini, but then he has 3 planets in the Gemini house, which really emphasizes his Gemini skills. And last but not least, we have Notorious B.I.G. and Lauryn Hill, both rappers, both Sun in Gemini and Mercury in Gemini. Sun is the spotlight. They were out there. They weren't writers. They were out there in the spotlight as performers. And both Mercury and Gemini, which is communication. Very quick with their words. This is the next category for Gemini, which is communicators. Now, I have 4 very different examples. Let's go through them. The first example is Mark Zuckerberg. If you look at his chart, he has Midhaven in Gemini, which is his public persona. He's famous for Gemini. He also has South Node, which is basically his habit. But he also has North Node, which is very, very complicated. So he's learning Gemini, but he also falls back on the Gemini house. Very complicated, but he's got a lot of Gemini nonetheless, right? Gemini is the communicator. You want to communicate with others. Hello, he created Facebook, the communication machine. The second example is Morgan Freeman. He is a Gemini with Sun in Gemini, and he also has his South Node in Gemini, which is his security blanket, his habit, his comfort zone. He is known for his voice. If you think about it, he is always, obviously he's an actor, so he's just so talented as an actor, but he's also always doing voiceovers. Big, big thing for him. The third example for communicator, Gemini, is JFK. He had the most well-known speech of any president, and he was known to be one of the best speakers as a president. Makes sense. He had Sun, Venus, which is passion, love, and beauty, and South Node in Gemini. Now, if you also think about it, his Gemini kind of also did him in a little bit because he did have that lying streak with the cheating. But we won't give him that. We'll give him some good stuff because he was a good president. And the last one is Jim Carrey. Now let's discuss Jim Carrey. He is such a perfect example of what mutable energy is. He's so flexible and adaptable. I mean, just the way that he can move his face and his facial expressions, and he's just such a good example of mutable Gemini energy. Now, he's not a Gemini, but his moon is in Gemini and his South Node, and look at how many planets he has in the Gemini house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planets in the Gemini house. That is a lot of Gemini. And it's very, very, very clear because he's very quick and very witty with his words. The third category for Gemini is professional fronters. Now, what does that really mean? It means that Geminis are great at putting on that professional front and showing only what they need to show the perfect, put together side of themselves. And there's many examples of professional fronters. There's so many we can dive into, but I decided to go with the female goddess professional fronter. If you look at these four women, they're so good at just putting on this amazing, beautified front where everything looks so perfect on the outside. But do we really, really know if it's perfect on the inside? Not so sure. Let's look at all four of them. So clearly, Marilyn Monroe is a great example of this. She was a Gemini and had Mercury in Gemini. She very much lived a double life. She had two sides to her personality. And it is kind of what did her in. But that side to her that is that iconic beauty is really the skill set of her Gemini. And then you have Heidi Klum, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Saturn, all in Gemini. This woman is a powerhouse. If you think about all the things she does, she's a model, she's a mother, she hosts Project Runway. She does so many, so many things. And it's very much her Gemini, her flexible, adaptable, changeable nature. And of course, she's gorgeous. Then you have Angelina Jolie, Sun in Gemini, South Node, comfort zone, and Mercury. She was born in a Mercury retrograde, so it goes very inward with her communication, and you can kind of tell because she kind of comes off almost mysterious a little bit. She's not very like vocal, if you will, when she's in interviews, but then eventually she'll become chatty. But such a perfect example of Gemini. She's always putting on that front. You never really know what her problems are, right? She always looks perfect to the surface. And last but not least, Natalie Portman. Now, Natalie Portman could have been in the communicator category as well because she's such an amazing actress. And her acting skills are really about how she can communicate and convey words. But she also does this whole perfect dance where you just look at her and you're like, where's your flaw, girl, right? So Sun, Mars, and South Node in Gemini for Natalie Portman. Last category for Gemini is Gemini gone wrong. These are four examples of Gemini just gone wrong. Let's start with Joan Rivers. So Geminis, like I said before, are professional fronters. They want to come off perfect, right? And a lot of times it's all about the surface level of things, the physical body. So Joan Rivers is Gemini gone wrong because she's way tried to over-perfect her facial physique. Okay, too much plastic surgery. Love you, Joan. You're funny, but you're trying too hard with your Gemini. Sun in Gemini, Mercury, Venus, and she has all three of those in the Gemini house, so double Gemini. She's a Gemini in the Gemini house. The next example is John Edwards, political figure. Sun in Gemini, Moon in Gemini, Mars and Jupiter in Gemini. He is the epitome of the Gemini because he lived a complete double life. He was having an affair, his mistress was pregnant, he tried to throw money to hide it from the world because he was running for vice president, and all the while, his wife was dying of cancer. This is just heart-wrenching. This is an example of Geminis so separating their heart and their mind to the point where they don't even have a heart anymore. They just have a logical mind. And the last two examples are Bernie Madoff and Charles Ponzi. Now, you've heard of the phrase Ponzi scheme, right? Charles Ponzi created that. But what's ironic is Bernie Madoff did a Ponzi scheme, and they both have almost the exact same birth chart. They both have about 4 to 5 planets in Taurus. Now, that was last month's sign. And Taurus is all about money, so it makes sense. They were both these money people, but they were lying to people about money. Charles Ponzi, South Node in Gemini. Bernie Madoff, Mars in Gemini. It's no coincidence that they pretty much have the same birth chart. And another example of how separating the mind and the heart the Gemini way can sometimes lead to a double life, trying to be perfect like Joan Rivers, or like Bernie Madoff and Charles Ponzi, the biggest liars of society. Thank you so much for watching my third video in my sun sign video series. I will have videos for you every month, so please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And tell all your friends, especially your favorite Gemini pal. And don't forget to come over to my website, natalbirthchart.com. It's right below. Get your reading today. It's an amazing experience to see what's going on behind the surface for you, your husband, maybe your father, maybe your mother, brother, or maybe your biggest enemy, to see what's really going on. Goodbye, everyone.